Get your calendars out. February 17th, February 18th, live trading, San Diego. We got the Lowe's Coronado. I mean, what else would you want? This event is limited to 50 people. Look at your calendar, clear it, make sure you show up. If you want to be a rebel, this is the place to be. You got to sign up for it now. Giddy up, baby. Well, here we go again. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Rebel's Edge, and I'm joined by my brother John, who's been over in Switzerland, and he's gotten some really great drugs that have really put him in a youthful state. Good to see you, John.
Hey, pleasure being here.
Bang. Anyway, no, that's our man Glenn Fife. He's a part of Market Rebellion, does a great job with us, and he's kind of a guy who's got every tool in the toolbox, for crying out loud. He joins us here
about that.
a while. John is just traveling somewhere. I mean, I think he actually was back in Chicago or back in New York, and then all of a sudden he's probably on his way to Puerto Rico or something. I mean,
somewhere. I mean, we need one of those plane trackers on Twitter for him. You know what I mean?
I was going to say, we might have to start tracking that dude, man. Yeah. I mean, the guy is kind of everywhere when you think about it. He was in Switzerland, then he was in Austria, then he came back to New York, and now he's down in Florida, but he's going to Puerto Rico. I mean, the hell with that. I can't keep up with the guy. Hey.
Crazy.
All right. And the fun thing about this is, as you all know, this is a show about us talking about the macro minute. Then we've got our 4 different stocks that we're breaking down a little bit. We've got our unusual option activity, and then we get into sports. And I bring all that up because Glenn used to work with the Houston Texans, NFL. So he can give us some great insights when we get down to that. And we've got some fun stuff to kick around today there as well. All right, so now we're going to hit it with the macro minute, and we're going to start off like this. So, Glenn, what do you think? Here's what I think real quickly. We have finally gotten through basically a lot of the financials as far as earnings. Earnings season kicked off. We're starting to move along a little bit. We're seeing some tech. But today, I thought the interesting part was what we were seeing in the industrials. Particularly, it was 3M. It was GE and 3M. They were both off early. But then it turned into 3M that stayed, and it's continued to get beaten up pretty good. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah.
Is that your focus as well?
I mean, I don't know. I know I'm switching to Walmart branded Post-it notes because those things have gotten more expensive by the minute. Yeah, I mean, 3M, it's gotten hit. And I mean, historically, we've seen that, periods of high inflation, industrials tend to lag. So I think it's part of that whole theme, right? And I mean, we did see this nice little rally here over the last few months in GE. So that's another industrial name there that's outperformed, I would say, to the upside. But with 3M's case, I mean, yeah, it's just, I think part of the whole theme here with inflation and just over the course of history, you've seen where these stocks have underperformed in this type of period,
Yeah, those industrial names, definitely. Let's stick with 3M to just kick this whole thing off. And when we look at it, why are we kicking it off there? Well, they came out with their earnings. The stock is trading basically near its 52-week lows. I mean, it's got a range of 107 to 175. Here we are. Call it 115, 116, 117, somewhere in there. But it's down about 4, 5, 6%. It's definitely getting hit pretty good. And as opposed to all those tech names, Glenn, where they start cutting employees and everybody's like cheering about it and the stocks go higher, 3M said, oh, by the way, and I'll bet you they thought they might actually get a little kick in the pants and go up a little higher, but they didn't. They got a kick in the pants in the wrong spot because They said they're giving up about 2,500 folks are going to lose their jobs, unfortunately, as part of what they're doing as they're trying to see things through because they're talking about the demand, that's down. The consumer, they're looking a little bit weak. The outlook, they don't really like what they see. So tell me what your thoughts are on 3M. And shoot, this one couldn't keep up with what was going on with all of these layoffs. When they lay off somebody, everybody gets mad about it.
Yeah, I don't know if 2,500 just wasn't enough or what the case is there. I mean, unfortunately, but I think part of it might just be that the market's starting to discount these job cuts. They're starting to look past them and it's not as meaningful. You've seen it in the tech sector where these stocks have popped on this news. But it'll be interesting to see as those job cuts trickle through the other industries and sectors, if that's the same case, right? Where you see these pop. So I don't know. It's interesting to see this one drop on it. I know it's kind of flat here since the open at this point. So some volatile swings in both directions, especially there with that glitch in the morning with the markets. But yeah, it's very interesting with 3M here.
Absolutely. Now we're going to jump to Lululemon, a little bit different than that industrial space. And we've got an analyst out there, Glenn, from Bernstein, who's talking about all of the negatives that their perception is of this stock. And I've got a really easy word for that. I mean, I don't understand. I really find it crazy. And I think that I'm not alone because we're seeing what's going on with the stock. The stock got all the way down to 302 off of this downgrade, right? And they basically cut it back on the price target down, I think about $25 off of where it was. So the price target now about 290. Here's why I disagree with that, Glenn. And we can have a debate if you're on the other side of it. Either way, it's fine. But you know what? They still have revenue growth. They still have incredible growth. They still have margins, although those margins are coming in a little bit. They've got high traffic. They've got the consistency of growth, and they are still developing the men's section of Lululemon. They're still developing the exercise part of it. When I say that, I mean the mirror, which they bought for a song. And now that's becoming something that's a bigger and bigger part of what they are. So I think that there's a lot of different catalysts out there for Lulu. And by the way, its PE is probably close to the lowest that it's ever been. And that just tells me that, these guys are doing everything right. They're clicking. They've got some issues. It depends on if people have enough money to spend. But what do you think? Are these guys going to be able to continue on? I think they are. I own the stock.
I think so too. I'm bullish on them long term. Absolutely. I mean, since the start of the year of 2022, I mean, the stock hasn't really gone anywhere. And so, you could say maybe it's finding some sort of a bottom here. I know I keep going there and shopping there, and I see a ton of people. The stores are packed. I mean, like you always say, boots on the ground. And every time I go in there, it's packed. And for the most part, it's kids with their parents. The parents are buying the kids the clothes there. And the interesting fact that I will point out with that is that Under Armour is up off the lows since October, about 80% up. And so whereas Lulu's only up about 10%. And so that's kind of interesting to me where, Under Armour has all those outlets out there. And it may be something where the consumer going to that cheaper product now as inflation is hitting their pockets. Right. So, yeah, I think that's probably what I'm looking at there with that. It might just take some time for Lulu to take off from here. Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I own the stock. I've owned this stock for almost forever. It was $66 when I first bought this stock. And my rationale was, what? These guys have so much growth out there, and they've actually proven that out time and time again. And oh, by the way, when you look at margins, if any guy who's a bull, any analyst who's a bull on Nike, how can you be a bull on Nike and then look over at Lulu and say, you know what? I think these guys aren't going to be able to do it when you look at the margin difference. It's huge, and it's in favor of Lulu. Next up, we're going to go to Microsoft. Now, Microsoft is an interesting one because they've got earnings tonight, and it's going to be interesting, Glenn, because there's a lot going on there. Number one, we did have some unusual option activity in there yesterday. John talked about that, and they were buying this week's expiring, so they were doing it in front of earnings, but expecting the earnings to be pretty good. It was a bullish call buying. But the interesting thing that I'm seeing going on is we know the PC sales are brutal, right? I mean, that's a no. But we also know that there's been a little bit of a pullback in terms of a little deceleration from Azure and that going into the cloud space. But how big is that really going to be, and how are they going to be able to counter that? And on the other side of things, they are getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the second in AI, which has become a story today. We talked about it last week, if you tuned in here, and we talked about their AI and their Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and all these folks who are involved in the companies that are actually going to change the world in the future. And now it looks like they're going to be putting, I don't know, maybe as much as $10 billion into that. So I'm pretty bullish going into tonight. How about you?
Yeah, well, here's one for you. they're expecting about a 4% move on Microsoft going into earnings, and Microsoft is actually closed within that expected move 73% of the time. So at least off of earnings, I'm looking for more of the same. I'm curious as to your thoughts on what Gene Munster said yesterday, where he said that Google has been working on this for a long time now, a competitor of sorts to ChatGPT and OpenAI. And he said that he thinks that version is going to be better than this Microsoft one. So I'm kind of looking for some insights as we get through Microsoft's earnings on if any of the competitors out there, any limelight, of their products that they're working on come to fruition. If I'm curious as to your thoughts. What Gene said he thinks it's going to be better. What do you think?
Yeah, I love Gene. You know that. I mean, we are both Minnesota guys, although I live in Florida now, but I love him to death. But I don't agree on that because of what I know who those founders are and a lot of the money that went in early on into this company. And it starts with Elon Musk. We all know enough about him already. Peter Thiel, he's another one of those, of course. AWS, Amazon, there's another one. I mean, they have some of the biggest, boldest, smartest folks that were at the beginnings of that company. And so founders. And so when I look at that, Glenn, it's tough for me to think that the guys at Google are going to be better than what we are seeing in this grouping of just brilliant people that have gotten together for AI. And John and I talked about this last week in their competition with Chegg and the educational world and how AI is changing in that world in a
Right.
just like an instant, almost completely destroying other companies. And just watching how that's going, I think my money's on that one, man. I think Microsoft's doing the right thing by trying to get more involved in this. They're already involved, but they're going to get bigger.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely going to be a battle for the next few years, if not decades, right? So we'll see who comes out on top. But one name that did report this morning, DR Horton, beats on earnings. But the key point there is they're saying that they expect higher sales in Q2. So I'm
Mhm.
curious here, is this a housing market? Is it improving in the housing market, or is it just maybe a short-term bounce we're seeing here?
It's a really interesting thing that they are as positive, Glenn, as they are about that. Because when you go back to last quarter, things were pretty awful, really. I mean, the net sales themselves were awful. The backlog is down 46%. You look at the net sales themselves, they were down 40% year over year. There's a lot of negatives in what they had just produced. And yet, as they look forward, they see this coming. Here's the problem that I've got with that. I look at these housing numbers and you just wonder, and I own this stock, by the way, but I look at these housing numbers and I think to myself, where the 30-year rate is makes me kind of a little bit more hesitant. And I say that because for a long time, we were talking about these rates being all the way down into the 3% or less area. And now we're talking about 6% or more area. I mean, that's got to slow things down. And I really do question whether or not, and we'll find out in another 3 months, but it should be pretty interesting to watch how this whole thing does unfold over the next couple of weeks and months and so forth. But I'll tell you what, stock hit a 52-week high today. So the folks out there investing continue to seem to really like what's going on in the housing and the builders themselves. So that's pretty good.
Absolutely. Let's do some UOA.
Yeah. You want to start it off or you want me to kick it
Go ahead.
off?
Yours is up first.
I'm going to stick with energy. I said that for a while we hadn't seen a whole lot of energy. Well, Transocean Rig, which is one of the favorites of Glenn, he knows that world pretty well down there, down in the South, down in Houston. But I'll tell you what, it's a high beta name. This is one of those drillers, and we talk about these names in the service area all the time and how much beta that they've got, and this one's got everything. Yesterday, somebody came out and on the unusual side of things later in the day bought 10,000 of the March 7 calls. Well, they weren't done yesterday. They came back today, and this one's interesting. They bought 4,400 of the February 6.5 calls. Now, this is a stock that not too long ago was trading in the threes, and now it's trading a little bit over 6. So do I think there's a little bit more upside? I actually do. And those options, by the way, were about 30 cents up to about 34 cents. So fairly inexpensive. I love the risk reward. I like the energy space. We know what happened with oil in a very short period of time. 72 to 82. It's easing back a little bit today. I think it's going to continue on a path where it goes a little bit higher as well. I think this name's going to go higher. I own these calls.
I agree. And to keep it going within the oil space, I think oil's going to go higher from here. And we got some action this morning in USO and repeated action as we've seen in previous months leading up to this year in January. We've just continued to see hits in USO. So they went out to February, the 7250 calls. It's actually a roll up. This is a bull call spread. 14,000 of the February 7250 calls bought for about $2. And they sold the 78 calls against it for about 58 cents. So this is a roll up. So I do think that, they've made some on that first one from the 10th of February that expired. They're rolling into these monthlies here and seeing some continuous action in USO. So I really like it going forward.
Yep, I like that name, and I love seeing that. Like you just said, we see rig and we see that in the same day. We kind of like seeing those energy names kind of grouped together. All right, Glenn, now we're going to go to the fun part with sports. You and I love talking about this. I was a former player. You were smarter than me because rather than being a player, you actually could take care of your body and you were working in the office side of the whole thing with the Houston Texans.
I would have liked the paychecks a little better on your end, though,
They are a little bit different sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I'm going to hit this first one with, do the 49ers have a shot against Philly on the road? All of the headaches that everybody talks about and all of that. But I think the reality is, yes, they do. And here's why, Glenn. I look at this 49ers team. I find them to be almost perfectly complete. And yes, even with Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, because he's done the right thing by the 49ers. He's not giving up the ball. He's not throwing interceptions. He's doing everything he can to control the game as much as he can and get the ball in the right receiver's hands whenever it is he's throwing the ball, particularly with Kittle, who's done an unbelievable job. McCaffrey and Samuel. Now, how do you defend those guys? Because sometimes they're running back, sometimes they're receivers, sometimes they're throwing the ball. I mean, those two guys make it that much more complicated for a defense. So I think when I look at the 49ers and I think about the opportunities, how about the fact they've won 12 straight games and they've got a third string quarterback, Glenn. I mean, think about that for just a second. It's absolutely amazing. I love that he goes to Kittle. I love that he ends up going to his receivers as well. They've got a deep bench as far as some of the running game. And I think that running game is a big part of, if they can continue to do that, I think Philadelphia is going to be scratching their head on what they need to do on the defensive side to slow them down. So I think the 49ers have more than just a shot. I'm going to go out there right now and say I think the 49ers beat them out there in Philadelphia. Ooh. What do you think?
That's a tough one. That's a bold call, but I agree with you. They're a complete team all around. They're an aggressive team. They're tough. Especially on defense, and DeMeco Ryans has really led that team on the defensive side. It's going to be a defensive battle, in my opinion. I actually think, there's both these teams can score, but the defensive battle that we're going to see between DeMeco Ryans and Jonathan Gannon, both of them candidates for the head coaching position at the Houston Texans. Yeah. I think we might see a low scoring game. And so it'll be interesting to see that defensive battle take place. But you're right, with those two running back receiver duo that San Francisco has, I mean, they're versatile. And that's the key here in the playoffs is having versatile playoffs or players. So I like the pick. I actually like it. I think I'm going to go with you here on San Francisco. I'm a big DeMeco Ryans fan. He's my pick for the head coaching gig at the Houston Texans. I think he's going to get it. But this is going to be a battle right here on the defensive side. And one key thing here is I think our sports guru here at Market Rebellion might have a good pick on San Francisco Philly game here coming up. So stay tuned for that.
Well, and I'll tell you this, here's the next one. So it's the Cincinnati Bengals, right? I mean, they're going up at Kansas City Chiefs. Do they even have a shot? And the answer is, I actually think both. Last week I said all four home teams I thought would win. Well, three of them did, one did not. Now this week, I think both road teams are going to take the win. And here's why I say that, Glenn. So when you look at it, Kansas City Chiefs actually won the last 5 games of the regular season. You know who beat them before they got on that little streak? Well, a team named the Cincinnati Bengals, 27-24. So that one sort of lined up, I think, now. And you've got Mahomes hurt a little bit, right? I mean, he's got his own issues as well. So that's going to be something that we'll see how that goes. I think Heineke did a really nice, or Henny rather, did a really nice job stepping in this past week when the injury occurred. But it's going to be tough. But I'll tell you, ball control does sometimes rule. And what I like about the Cincinnati Bengals is it's not just Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's great. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. But they also can run the football with two big, mean, punishing running backs. I mean, like Piran and Mixon, both were slamming against the Buffalo Bills. And that's the reason they were able to come out of that game, because they just controlled the ball. They held the ball. They had 30 first downs in that game, man. And they had the ball for 33 minutes. So with all that being said, I think that they can control the ball again. I think that if they can do that, they have a great shot to take down the Chiefs at Arrowhead, which is not easy. But shoot, this is a team that just went up to Buffalo in 3 feet of snow or whatever the hell's up there, and they came out pretty good as well. So I'm going to put that one with Cincinnati. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, I think if there's anyone who can adapt to a injured quarterback and still need to build a game plan around that, it's Andy Reid. But Joe Burrow is just unstoppable right now. One of the key things, I mean, that came out of that game against the Bills was the running attack, and nobody talked about it. Everybody talked about Joe Burrow coming out of it. But I think the storyline there was how they just ran all over the Bills and controlled the clock. So you're absolutely right about that. And it's interesting now with Vegas, they opened it up at -1.5 in Chiefs' favor. And that's now since swing to -2 last I checked for the Bengals. So we'll see here. I'm picking the Bengals too, though, to win that game. And I think they're going to make their way into the Super Bowl and hopefully win that one too.
You know, when you look at what Joe Burrow has done in his short career already in the NFL, man, the kid has been pretty much money, right? I mean, he really is. I mean, it's been incredible to watch, and he's fun to watch. And you know, he doesn't ever point the finger at, I love this about him. His offensive line has given up more sacks than any team in the NFL. And the guy never talks about it. He never, ever says, well, you know, this or well, that. And by the way, when they beat Buffalo, they had a left tackle and the right guard were both out on that before they even played that game. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. And that I'm just amazed at that kid and what he's able to do. Glenn, I love that you were able to do this, man. We're going to do it again sometime.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder about my brother. You never know. So keep your phone ready, because I might be calling you for tomorrow. You never know what that guy's up to.
I'm here. I'm here for you, brother.
All right. Thanks for watching the Rebels Edge, folks. Make sure you continue to do so. We're going to grow. We have a lot of conversations going on, and we'll fill you in as soon as we can actually get everything nailed down. Talk to you then.